you still believe that there is a real risk of this getting out of control before Trump takes office and we have a version of World War III.
Of course, yeah. I mean, uh, they sent 6 missiles this morning. Well, I don't know how many missiles they have. They may not have many. They may not be able to do anything much. But what if they send 60
Yeah.
to some undefended site? Uh, I don't know, Larry. I repeat myself. I'm absolutely, totally convinced that not only the United States government in Washington is insane, and I mean that literally, they are literally insane people, but so are the leaders of Europe. They're all insane. That fool that's the Prime Minister of England, he's as stupid as all of them. It's the same thing. You get a billionaire son like Soros' son, and he welcomes the risk of nuclear war. I mean, you got to be insane. If you're a billionaire, you should be thinking about yachts and beautiful women and enjoying life, not getting blown off the face of the earth. It's a stupid thing. It's just it's a form of stupidity that is an ingrained mental illness.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
It affects, look, another example. Also, I think this morning or yesterday, the German foreign minister threatened China.
yeah, yeah.
Now, Germany threatening China, Germany of zero military significance. China dwarfs them militarily, economically, and here's this stupid little woman threatening China. And why does Germany want a foreign minister accumulating enemies like that? What do you? It's a form of mindlessness. I think these people think that somehow they're superheroes or something.
I,
Uh,
to me,
Maybe they're Walter Mitty types, or I don't know what it is.
I mean, to me, it makes no sense, what they're doing. Is it actual clinical insanity, or is it just adherence to an insane policy because they've been brought up as super liberals, if phony humanitarians? I can't figure it out either. Why they would be so illogical about this. I mean, whether it's a clinical insanity or just the constant propaganda that they were raised with and reinforced by bribes, by other inducements. I don't know. But as you know, at the very least, it really makes no sense.
Makes no sense. And Larry, also it's characteristic of the entire world. You would have thought when Biden made that announcement, the whole world would have risen up and said, "What are you doing? Committing us to nuclear death for some personal, some American reason that makes no sense?" I mean, he's committed the whole world
Yeah.
to death, and then we're all sitting there silent.
Also something we've talked about before. Some of our viewers may not have heard this before, but basically, Putin's a bad guy. He invaded Ukraine. He wants to take over all of Europe. He wants to reconstitute the Soviet Union. All that is total baloney. What this really is that once we installed our puppet in Ukraine, they started attacking Donbass, which is Russian culturally. They speak Russian. They identify as Russians. They're attacking that area, and they're threatening to bring NATO onto Russia's border by joining NATO. So this is what provoked Putin. We were the provokers.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because after the Soviet Union fell apart, we've talked about this before, the agreement between Gorbachev and Reagan was that NATO wouldn't advance any further east and Russia wouldn't advance any further west. And it worked until these neocons started playing games and changed all that by encroaching on Russia.
Yeah, it worked for a few years until the Soviet Union collapsed.
Yeah.
And when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Zionist neocons saw an opportunity to establish American hegemony because the Soviet Union was the only constraint on American unilateralism. And so they seized it in 1991. So it was only, like 2 or 3 years after Reagan was gone, when the Soviet Union collapsed, that we, or the people of Washington, Clinton, basically, it was the Clinton regime,
Yeah.
realized that the constraint on us was gone and we didn't have to keep any agreements.
And of course, for those out there who may to think that we are anti-Semitic because we mention Zionist neocons, that's not the case at all. We're just describing the situation as it actually is. It has nothing to do with being Jewish.
I, well, with that, you really you open up the second part of this discussion, and that is we have an internal threat that is probably almost as great as this external one we've been discussing. And it does have to do with Jews. It's the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act.
Right.
The House, the Republican House, has already passed it some months ago. I'll describe the act in just a minute. At the moment, Chuck Schumer, the current Senate Majority Leader, is trying to attach the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act to the Defense Appropriation Bill. He does not want it as a standalone vote. He wants it so the senators can say, I'm voting for a defense bill, not for special privileges for Jews. And so he's pushing it as this amendment instead of just letting the Senate pass it as a standalone. It protects the senators from criticism of sacrificing the United States Constitution in order to protect Israelis from criticism. Well, that's what the act does. What does the act do? It defines Jews as protected persons. This is the words used in the House and Senate. Jews, and it doesn't just mean Israelis, because all of this was provoked by the campus protest against Israel because of Gaza. So Jews are protected persons. And what are they protected from? They are protected from any criticism, even implied criticism. And what is the punishment? Well, it seems that this act, which would just be stage one of a series, this act only punishes universities by ending their federal aid and their accreditation. Now, I don't understand how the act can end the accreditation, because the accreditation is done outside the government, as I understand it. The accreditation committees are not run by the government, as I understand it. So what the act does, it says that if a university permits students to protest Israel, they are in violation of the law and they will lose their accreditation and their federal financial support. And Trump himself has said the same exact thing.
Right.
So now we have the Republican Speaker of the House, the current Democrat Majority Leader in the Senate, and the President-elect all agree that protecting Israel from criticism is far more important than the Constitution of the United States and the First Amendment.
Yeah, and Paul, here we should make a distinction for those who are not following this closely. Violent protests, assaults on people, physical harm, yes, that should be punished, but not vocal protest, because that is the First Amendment. And once you destroy the First Amendment, then the media goes next, although they're already largely on board with one side. But I mean, without the watchdog of which the media is supposed to be performing enshrined in the First Amendment, the only information, the only version of the truth you're going to get is from the government. So, I mean, this is a critical step now in assaulting the First Amendment. And again, the distinction is these campus protests, if somebody attacks a Jewish student violently, physically, arrest the guy. There should be consequences. But if somebody's just shouting anti-Israeli protests, that is the First Amendment. And whether you agree with what Israel is doing or not agreeing with it, the overriding importance is once you restrain speech on any group or any issue, then where does it stop? You get government control of what you could say and think.
Yes, yes, Larry, but you see, it's already illegal to assault people and use violence against them. We
Right,
don't need any special protection for Jewish people
right,
because assault is assault, whether it's a Jew or a Muslim or a white person or an Asian, or it's assault. It's illegal and it has consequences. And so we don't need this protection for that reason.
right,
But and that's not the reason they're being given this act. They're being given it because it protects them from anything they might regard as criticism.
yeah,
In other words, anything, any kinds of comment. So it basically stops protests of Israel's actions in Gaza, in Lebanon, or wherever, and it makes it illegal to state facts. Well, if high officials who have sworn to uphold the Constitution have no respect for it, which apparently the Senate Majority Leader, the House Speaker, and the majority of the representatives in the House, and the President-elect has to take an oath to uphold the Constitution against enemies, domestic and foreign, and they don't respect the Constitution, how do you have a country? We've talked about it before. The United States is the Constitution. That's what it is.
right. Now, Paul, I would assume that this would go eventually before the U.S. Supreme Court. Is there any way to keep this going despite what the Supreme Court may rule, or can we even depend on the Supreme Court to strike this down as unconstitutional?
It depends on whether they get intimidated in some way. Look, to answer your question, look what's going on in Pennsylvania. We should talk about this in a different program about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has ruled that the Democrats cannot count votes in the ongoing process of trying to overturn the election of the Republican to the Senate.
Yeah.
They can't count votes that are not properly filled out, whose signature doesn't match the name on the vote, and so on and so on. And the court is being openly defied
Right.
by the Democratic electoral officials.
Yeah.
They're saying, screw the court, we're not paying attention to the ruling.
Yeah.
Well, the same thing could happen on the federal level. What authority, what enforcement powers does the court have? They don't have any if it's not accepted, if their ruling is not accepted.
Yeah, in fact, that's a good point. So the court could rule they're being defied. It's illegal for them to do that. But if there's no prosecutors or district attorneys or attorney generals willing to prosecute the violators, then they get away with it. And this has happened increasingly throughout the country, where you have these woke, liberal, progressive prosecutors that won't go after illegal activity if it doesn't conform with their political biases.
Right, and woke judges that won't let evidence be presented.
Right.
So I know everyone is scared to death of being called anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
So it's easy to shut people up and to get this Anti-Semitism Awareness Act passed. But it's a direct attack on the Constitution.
Yeah.
And the First Amendment is the most important amendment of the Constitution, because if you don't have the freedom to speak freely, you can't find truth. You can't establish facts. You can't establish what the truth is. And that's why it's being attacked. The First Amendment is inconsistent with official narratives.
Yeah.
We had recently Hillary Clinton say that publicly. We had the editor of the Wall Street Journal say that publicly. We've had other people say that publicly. We've got to get rid of the Constitution because it's in the way of our agendas. So when the leadership of the country, including law school deans,
Yeah.
don't respect the Constitution, where is its authority? Particularly with courts, because they got no army, they got no police force. They rely on the corporation that their rulings are right, just. So it's serious, and a few people are starting to see how serious it is, that this is the creation of a special category of people, Jews, about which nothing can be said to which they object. This is independent of truth, facts, evidence.
Yeah.
So it is also a violation of the 14th Amendment, which requires equal protection of the law. The only way, under the 14th Amendment, the only way this act could be passed if everyone is included in it, not just Jews, but Gentiles of all ethnicities, Muslims, Hindus. You got to have everybody in it, because that's what the 14th Amendment requires. So why do we see Trump, the majority of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, the entire Congress willing to pass something that's a violation of the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment? Why? Well, why? The only explanation is money.
Yeah.
They're paid. There's no other explanation, except they don't believe in the principles of the country, and their oath of office was perjury.
We've said this before too, that you've had corrupt politicians all throughout the history of the country, even from the founding. But in my view, it's never reached this proportion before, this level of corruption where even the Constitution now is being openly talked about as being in the way of social justice or whatever. I mean, it's never reached this point before, at least publicly and unabashedly. So this is the new stage, the unprecedented stage that I think we're in now.
Yes, you're right. The foundation of the country is eroded. If the leaders don't believe in the Constitution and don't uphold it, you haven't got a country. And so you can see the leaders have lost their character. And the real question is what percentage of the population itself has lost its character?
Yeah, even though Trump was elected, something else we've talked about before is the newer generations know nothing of American history, know very little about the Constitution and the protections it affords, the significance of it. With social media now, entertainment, infotainment, and all that, the stuff that we grew up with, that I was taught in school, at least the basics of how the government works, the Constitution, the founding of the country, You talk to a kid today, they don't know anything about it. They don't think it's any big deal.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, but actually, they do know a lot, but what they know is wrong. They have been taught wrongly
Yeah.
that Western civilization is racist and evil and exploitative, and that merit is racist. Even mathematics and science are racist.
How do you figure that?
Yeah, but this all come out of the universities. We've talked before about the Marxists, the cultural Marxists, and how they came in, and this has been going on for decades. And so you've had generations of students come up in school where this type of teaching has grown and grown and grown, and essentially today has crowded out the kind of affirmative teaching of a culture that's required if you're going to have a country.
Yeah.
You can't have a country if everything about it is wrong and evil and all that. Well, who wants to be part of it? And so by demonizing the country and Western civilization and all works of art, they're all racist. By demonizing everything, you create the conditions for overthrowing it. And we now see that it has proceeded to the point that the House, the Senate, and the president-elect are willing to overthrow the Constitution in order to protect Jews from criticism.
Yeah. You know,
Well,
I brought up this criticism.
this is serious. This is serious. It shows there's no belief. If you don't have a belief system or it's exploded and destroyed, what have you got? How do you make a country great again that doesn't believe in itself or whose leaders don't believe in it? You can't. People have to realize the situation has gone very far.
So
And
it's
the whole country's changed.
so it's wrapping up now. Well, for goodness. So even though Trump has there's been a restoration. Trump is back in office, soon to be. Considering recent developments, it's no guarantee that Trump is going to be able to, or perhaps even willing to make everything right again.
Yes, that's certainly the case. Uh, the belief system is eroded. The character of the people are eroded. In fact, Larry, we might not even be here by inauguration. It really depends on what Putin's response to this is.
Yeah.
And it's really, and I think he knows that the world's in his hands. And so I think this will make him very responsible.
Well,
And
Roberts,
he will do what he can to avoid what he has promised us. He will do everything he can to avoid the retribution that he has warned against. How long he can do that? This time, he can do it, and it will cause another provocation that will be harder for him to ignore. And how quick that comes, I mean, we're living on borrowed time. I'm not exaggerating. We're threatening the strongest nuclear power in the world with a continuation of their existence as a sovereign country. And they can't accept it. And if we don't stop, sooner or later, they got nowhere to back up. And that's the question. And there's no awareness. There's no sign of any awareness in Europe, NATO, the EU, Washington, the media, anywhere. Or among the foreign policy experts. You can read Johnson's Russia list. It's a daily collection of all the foreign policy articles. You can't believe the mindlessness, the utter total ignorance, the utter total stupidity. And these are the experts. And there's nobody saying, hey, look, this is a serious situation. We got to think about this. No, it's all, oh, this Russians get them.
Yeah. Well, Craig Roberts, we will be talking again about other issues, hopefully. But as you say, we're at a critical point now. How it's going to turn out, nobody knows. Till next time, Paul, thanks for being with us.